Hopefully, it sensitizes us to appreciate the very breath we have. Life's fleeting beauty often hides in the mundane, unnoticed until a seemingly small gesture shifts our perspective. It reminds us to cherish connections, even the simplest ones. This story began with a young girl's curious remark. "Why?" she asked. "What do you mean?" I replied. She shrugged and said, "Who cares if it's real?" Her indifference startled me. "You don't care if it's real?" I asked, realizing how differently we view the world. This interaction stayed with me, especially when considering someone like Keanu Reeves, an actor whose genuine acts of kindness and humility transcend his celebrity status. Keanu Reeves is not just known for his iconic roles in films like John Wick, but also for his warm and grounded demeanor. His gestures of compassion often make headlines, but one recent interaction stood out: a touching connection with a 9-year-old superfan. Every day, this little girl would sit on her porch, eagerly waving at him as he passed by during his morning walk. Her simple act became a quiet ritual for Keanu, a moment of innocent joy amidst the noise of fame. But one day was different. As Keanu approached the familiar house, the porch was empty. The absence struck him more profoundly than he anticipated. The small, weathered house, which usually hummed with soft radio tunes and signs of life, was silent. He paused, scanning the area, hoping the girl was merely inside. Yet, something felt off, a heaviness in the air, an unspoken concern gnawing at him. Throughout the day, the girl's absence lingered in his mind, refusing to fade. By afternoon, the curiosity transformed into genuine worry. It wasn't like him to dwell on a stranger, but this girl had become a quiet yet significant part of his mornings. Her bright eyes and enthusiastic waves had a way of grounding him, reminding him of life's simple, unfiltered connections. By evening, Keanu found himself retracing his steps, walking back to the house. Compelled by a sense of unease, he knocked on the door, hoping for a simple explanation. What he discovered would not only surprise him, but also touch the hearts of many who heard the story. The porch that had once been a symbol of joy now revealed a deeper truth about kindness, care, and the power of small gestures. Keanu Reeves, in his characteristic humility, showed that even amidst his busy life, he valued human connections enough to act when someone he barely knew needed help. Little did he realize that his decision to stop and check on her would inspire countless others to cherish the quiet, meaningful moments in their own lives. Keanu approached cautiously, his unease growing with every step. The mailbox was stuffed with unopened letters, and the porch remained eerily deserted. He knocked gently on the door, then harder when no one responded. The silence felt strange, oppressive even. Moving to peer through a window, his heart sank at what he saw. Inside, he caught sight of a small figure lying on the floor. It was her, the girl who had waved at him every day. She appeared extremely weak, her breathing faint and shallow. Acting on instinct, Keanu pulled out his phone and dialed 911, urgently explaining what he had found. The operator assured him that help was on the way. Keanu stayed by the window, speaking softly in case the girl could hear him, though she didn't stir. Each moment felt like an eternity until the wail of sirens broke the heavy silence. Paramedics arrived swiftly, their practiced efficiency both reassuring and a stark reminder of how dire the situation was. Keanu relayed what little he knew. She was a young girl who lived there, often alone, and always full of life, until today. Overhearing one of the paramedics mention dehydration and malnourishment, his heart sank further. As the paramedics worked to stabilize the girl, whom he now learned was named Mia, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the quiet street. Keanu stood by the door, his mind racing with worry. He thought briefly of following the ambulance to the hospital but hesitated, concerned about the possibility of her parents returning to an empty home without knowing what had happened. The idea unsettled him, but he stayed focused, watching as the paramedics continued their work. The flashing lights of the ambulance painted the scene in stark relief, the stillness of the street broken only by the occasional murmur of the paramedics. Then, Keanu noticed a figure in the distance, hurrying down the sidewalk. The woman moved with urgency, her slim frame and quick steps cutting through the evening stillness. She was dark-skinned, with a troubled expression etched across her face. Something about her features caught Keanu's attention, the faint resemblance to Mia. As she drew closer, the woman's steps slowed, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. Strangers gathered at her home, an ambulance parked outside, and the unsettling glow of emergency lights. Keanu guessed she might be Mia's mother. Did it turn out to be her? The answer remained to be seen as the evening unfolded, revealing the truth behind the moment that had brought them all together. The woman's alarm seemed to deepen as she took in the scene outside her home. Her gaze finally landed on Keanu, and her expression shifted, initial confusion giving way to a flicker of recognition. She froze mid-step, her eyes narrowing as she studied him closely. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't immediately place it. Her mind raced to connect the dots. The composed figure in front of her, with his distinctive features, wasn't just any passerby. She had seen him before, not in her neighborhood, but on a screen. Slowly, the realization dawned. This was Keanu Reeves, someone whose movies she had watched more than once. For a moment, she hesitated, questioning why a famous actor would be standing outside her apartment. But the thought was fleeting, quickly replaced by the gravity of the scene before her. Her attention darted between the paramedics, the stretcher carrying Mia, and the man she now recognized. Fear and urgency propelled her forward as she entered the apartment, her disbelief evident in her every move. Keanu observed her reaction, and his earlier assumption was confirmed. This was Mia's mother. The resemblance between the two, combined with her evident concern, left no doubt. She stood frozen for a moment, her face a portrait of shock, before stepping closer to her child. The paramedics were moving swiftly, ensuring Mia was stable and ready to be transported to the hospital. Finally, the woman found her voice, her words trembling with panic as she asked what had happened to her daughter. Her eyes searched the faces around her, desperate for answers, before settling on Keanu with a look of pleading. Taking a deep breath, Keanu calmly explained the situation. He recounted how he had grown concerned after not seeing Mia at her usual spot that morning. That concern had driven him to check on her, leading to his discovery of her unconscious and in need of urgent medical care. As Keanu spoke, the woman's expression shifted from shock to guilt. She seemed overwhelmed, a mother torn between the demands of her life and the well-being of her child. When the paramedics began carrying Mia to the waiting ambulance, the woman moved to follow them. Before she climbed in, Keanu gently reassured her. "Don't panic," he told her softly. "Everything is going to be all right." In an unexpected gesture of generosity, he promised to cover Mia's hospital bills, handing her some cash and a card with his contact information. "Call me if any other medical expenses come up," he said. The woman looked at him, her eyes welling up with gratitude, before stepping into the ambulance to be with her daughter. Keanu stood quietly, watching the ambulance pull away, his thoughts lingering on the child who had once brightened his mornings with a simple wave. Keanu assured Mia's mother that he would remain in touch and support them in any way necessary, asking if there was anything else the family might need to help Mia recover. His sincerity brought tears to the woman's eyes, and for a brief moment, the overwhelming worry on her face softened. The combination of relief and disbelief at the kindness she was receiving left her speechless. As the ambulance doors closed behind her, Keanu gave a small nod of reassurance, watching as the vehicle pulled away into the night. He stayed for a moment, his eyes following the ambulance's tail lights until they disappeared. Though the mother's presence had brought some comfort to the situation, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that more needed to be done. Mia's condition didn't seem to stem from a lack of love, but rather from challenges beyond the family's control. Before leaving, Keanu made a quiet promise to himself. He would follow up with them. This wasn't just about ensuring Mia's recovery, it was about making sure the family wouldn't face such struggles again. He resolved to set up a meeting with Mia's mother once things stabilized, intending to offer meaningful assistance. As Keanu walked away from the apartment, the weight of the day stayed with him. He thought about Mia, the young girl who had so often brightened his mornings with her warm, enthusiastic waves. Those small, innocent gestures had left an impression on him. Now, as he retraced his steps down the familiar street, his mind wandered back to the first time he had noticed her. It had started on a warm morning, one that seemed no different from any other. Keanu had been on his usual walk when he first spotted her sitting on the porch of her apartment. She was deeply engrossed in sketching something in a notebook, the soft breeze rustling the pages as she worked, seemingly oblivious to the world around her. As Keanu approached, she looked up, their eyes meeting briefly. Without hesitation, she smiled and waved at him. The gesture was so pure, so unassuming, that it caught Keanu off guard. Surprised but charmed, he returned the wave, smiling back. For a brief moment, everything else in the world faded away. There was something about the energy she radiated, the simple joy she exuded, that stayed with him long after that morning. Now, as he walked on, he realized just how much those fleeting interactions had come to mean to him, and how they had ultimately led him to this moment. She wasn't just a random child. There was a genuine connection in those small, fleeting moments. Keanu couldn't help but feel a spark of warmth in his chest after their first interaction. As he continued on his way, her cheerful wave stayed with him, leaving an imprint on his thoughts. A few days later, he found himself riding his motorcycle along the same route, the memory of her smile fresh in his mind. Riding his motorcycle brought him a sense of freedom and focus, an experience he cherished almost as much as being on set. This day, though no longer warm, was still full of life. As Keanu neared her street, he noticed her again, standing by the sidewalk. The moment she saw him, her face lit up with excitement, and she waved enthusiastically. This time, there was an extra energy in her gesture, a kind of unspoken joy. Keanu waved back, slowing down as he approached. The girl, Mia, ran up to the side of the road, clutching something in her hands. It was a drawing, vibrant, colorful, and brimming with imagination. She handed it to him, her eyes shining with pride. The drawing depicted a brave hero wielding a sword in a dramatic battle scene, clearly inspired by one of his movies. Keanu's heart warmed at the gesture. He thanked her, genuinely admiring her talent, and told her how much it meant to him. Mia's face lit up even brighter at his praise, and as she turned back toward her porch, Keanu felt a profound sense of joy. Yet, the connection deepened further in their next encounters, leaving him with a mix of admiration and concern. On a breezy afternoon not long after, Keanu was walking his dog through the neighborhood, enjoying the peace and the wind's gentle touch. As he approached Mia's usual spot, there she was again, standing on her porch with her familiar wave. This time, her greeting was followed by a comment about his dog's playful antics. She laughed and pointed out how the dog kept spinning in circles, chasing its tail in a comical display. Keanu couldn't help but laugh with her, her light-hearted observation sparking a brief but meaningful conversation. During their exchange, he noticed something more. While Mia appeared cheerful and quick-witted, there was a subtle loneliness in her demeanor. She often seemed to be alone, likely because her parents worked long hours. Despite her jokes and smiles, Keanu couldn't ignore the quiet struggle beneath her bright exterior. These encounters, though seemingly small, began to take on deeper significance. What had started as simple gestures of kindness now felt like glimpses into a life that needed connection and care. Each interaction left Keanu more attuned to the spirited yet solitary child who had unwittingly become a part of his world. With Mia now in the hospital, Keanu reflected on their past encounters, realizing how much those small moments had built a connection between them. What had started as a simple wave had blossomed into a series of brief but meaningful exchanges. Standing there, lost in thought, Keanu began to wonder about Mia's life, the kind of family she came from and the struggles they might be facing. The scattered pieces of the puzzle started to fit together in his mind, each clue painting a deeper picture. One of the first clues had been the hours he passed her house. It was during school hours, a time when children her age should have been in class, yet Mia was always there, either sitting on the porch or walking up and down the sidewalk. The reality behind this became clearer after Keanu learned about Mia's life through her mother, uncovering a story filled with hardships and resilience. Mia's life had always been a struggle. She was a bright, creative young girl, but her circumstances forced her to grow up faster than most children. Her world revolved around the cramped apartment she shared with her mother and the hours she spent alone when her mother was at work. Mia's mother, a single parent, worked tirelessly to provide for her, juggling jobs as a night cleaner at a local office building and a part-time cook at a nearby diner. Her shifts often stretched late into the night, leaving her with barely enough time to rest before starting another demanding day. Despite her efforts, the strain of their situation was evident. Mia's education suffered as a result. Though she was intelligent and capable, the financial burden made it difficult for her to attend school regularly. Some days, they couldn't afford books, supplies, or even bus fare. On those days, Mia stayed home, finding solace in her sketchbook. She filled its pages with vibrant drawings, letting her imagination flourish even as her reality remained confined. It was during this time that she began waving at Keanu. His presence, even from afar, became a beacon of connection for her. His brief, kind waves made her feel seen in a way that few others did. Those moments of recognition, small as they might have seemed, brought her comfort and a sense of belonging. She would eagerly wait for the sound of his motorcycle or the sight of him walking his dog, ready to greet him with a wave, hoping for that fleeting acknowledgement in return. For Mia, those moments were more than just a simple exchange. They became her lifeline, a bright spot in her otherwise challenging days. For Mia, waving at Keanu had been one of the highlights of her day, a brief escape from her challenging reality. On the day she fell ill, her mother had been working a late shift cleaning the offices of a nearby law firm. The job barely covered their basic needs, but it was the only work she could find. Her long hours and absence weighed heavily on her, but the bills didn't stop coming, and she had no choice but to keep going. That afternoon, Mia had been feeling weak but hadn't told anyone. She didn't want to burden her mother, knowing how hard she worked. She ate the little food she found in the kitchen, returned to her drawings, and waited for her mother to come home. As the hours passed, her condition worsened. By the time Keanu found her, she had already collapsed from dehydration. When her mother returned home, she was devastated to find her daughter in such a state. Despite all her hard work and sacrifices, she now blamed herself for not being there when Mia needed her the most. Yet, deep down, she knew she had done everything she could to provide for them. Holding Mia in her arms, tears streamed down her face, a mix of worry, guilt, and helplessness. Amidst her despair, there was a glimmer of hope. She remembered Keanu, the kind stranger who had found Mia and called for help. His promise to take care of the medical bills gave her a sense of relief and gratitude. She recalled the appointment he had arranged and felt a spark of optimism. Maybe, just maybe, this was the turning point they needed. Keanu's silent promise to Mia and her mother wasn't just a moment of compassion. It felt like the beginning of something bigger. It symbolized a chance for change, for better days ahead. The question now remains, could this single act of kindness create a lasting impact? For Mia and her mother, it seemed to be the hope they had been longing for.